Thank you for joining me on the Save My Thyroid podcast, where I help people save their thyroid and regain their health. My name is Dr. Eric Osansky, and if you have hyperthyroidism, including Graves' disease or toxic multinodular goiter, then you will especially benefit from these episodes. If you have Hashimoto's thyroiditis, you also need to save your thyroid, and therefore you will also find many of the episodes to be valuable. You're about to listen to another Save My Thyroid health audit, as I will spend approximately 25 minutes chatting with someone who has a thyroid or autoimmune thyroid condition and give them actual advice to help them improve their health. In this Save My Thyroid health audit, I will speak with someone who has been dealing with thyroid eye disease along with cataracts as well as gallbladder issues. Her name is Malka, and we mainly focused on her eye health, although in the post-outro, I'll chat a little bit or I'll expand a little bit on the gallbladder. And just a reminder that this audit isn't exactly the same as a comprehensive consultation I do with the patient, as prior to doing an audit, I have the person fill out a brief application, and it's fine if they send a few basic blood tests, whereas with a patient consultation, I'll have them fill out a comprehensive health history and other forms, and they usually will also send a decent amount of labs for me to review. And of course, a patient consultation is a lot longer, but either way, I'm confident that you'll find this conversation to be valuable. Also, if you would like to apply to do an audit with me, you can do so by visiting savemythyroid.com/audit. As usual, make sure you listen to the post-episode chat after the outro music, as I'll expand on the AIP diet and thyroid eye disease, cataracts and thyroid health, my 5-day thyroid events, gallbladder and thyroid health, Tepezza, eye supplements, omega-3 index, selenium and thyroid eye disease, and steroids for thyroid eye disease. And you can access the show notes by visiting savemythyroid.com/199. Anyway, here's my conversation with Malka.
Welcome to the Save My Thyroid podcast, hosted by Dr. Eric Osansky. To stay up to date on the latest thyroid health-related topics, make sure to subscribe on your podcast player. And to get your free thyroid and immune health restoration action points checklist, visit SaveMyThyroidChecklist.com. The following discussion is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Please do not apply any of this information without first speaking with your doctor. Now let's head to the show.
So welcome to another Save My Thyroid audit. I'm very excited to chat with Malka here, as she's been dealing with thyroid eye disease and also cataracts, a number of different vision issues. So Malka, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great. I'm sure this will be a really interesting conversation. I work with a lot of people who have thyroid eye disease. So I definitely want to hear your background. You've been dealing with Graves itself for
A long
quite a
time.
long time, like 20 plus years, correct?
21, yeah. When my 21-year-old son was a baby, that's when I started feeling like I lost a lot of weight. So it was like in 2003, and I was only 25. They said, yeah, this sometimes happens, and they put me on the PTU, and I took it for 18 months, and I said, okay, it came, it left, we're done. And one of the other things that I found after that, the glare started bothering me, which I don't know, I didn't connect it to anything else. And then after that, I was okay. And then I had twins in 2009. When 2009 came, I started not feeling well, having trouble breathing, different things. And they said that hyperthyroidism could come back when you have twins. So I said, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that. So I went on another 18 months of the thing. And I said, okay, it's the twins. It's a separate thing. And then basically it came back again. And then one of my doctors, by the way, mentioned, oh, by the way, you have steroid cataracts. And I'm like, I never take steroids. I've never been on steroids. I don't have asthma. But I said, okay, they said, keep an eye on it. Just wear glasses. When you're careful, sunglasses or whatever. And then when 2020, I had a very stressful thing happen in my life. I started losing weight. I would go to the couch and I'd be out of breath and all the things. I lost a ton of weight. I lost 20 pounds. And basically, when my thyroid came back this time, they said, this is Graves' disease. Once it's come back this third time, it's become autoimmune rather than just, okay, it's coming, it's going. So basically, I went on the methimazole, probably about 18 months to 2 years, started going back, and then something came. I had another stressful event, so I came back again. But it was interesting. When I was in remission, I looked through the blood work, and when the doctor said that I was at goal, I started having, on my eyelids, I was having eczema. on my eyelids. It was very strange. And my eyes were very dry. So I went to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor said, this is thyroid eye disease. But it was interesting when I went to go check, he said, I can't correct you to 20/20. He said, you really need cataract surgery. And I'm like, I'm 45 years old. Wasn't expecting to need it that quickly. I ended up waiting for a second opinion, and I went, and the doctor said, at that point, my eyes were really very bad. So they did cataract surgery. I had cataract surgery done a few months ago. But it's interesting, now that my blood work was back at goal, now I started having another issue. And this was about 6 months after my cataract surgery. And I started seeing this like shiny image in my eye every so often. So I went to the doctor. This was just in August. And basically, she said my optic nerve was very swollen. And she got very worried. She said, go for an MRI. I had already gone for an MRI the first time, and they compared it. Both times they said there's nothing going on in the brain. At this point, I still actually haven't seen the neuro-ophthalmologist because they gave me an appointment in October and in January. So I'm still waiting for my appointments. It happens to be that actually my eyes have gotten worse in the last few weeks. At first, it was just that. And now over the last week, there's gray. I can't really see so well in my gray in my eye. And it's a little bit scary. I really can't see so well out of my right eye. My left eye is fine, but it's almost worse than when I had the cataracts. Because even when I did the cataracts, you could compare one eye to the other because you get one eye done and then the next one. Thank God you have two eyes because one is doing most of the work right now. And I had asked you, I'd gone onto one of your sessions. So this last few months, since that happened, that second thyroid eye disease was when I decided to go on the AIP diet. And I said, okay, you know what? Let's try it. Even though I'm at goal, so I wasn't quite sure exactly, but I said, even though I'm at goal, let's try to see if I can get rid of it by diet. So I've been almost 2 months now on this AIP diet. I've been having tons of greens and trying all different stuff to try to be helpful. You had mentioned some vitamins. So I went out and got, it's called Vision to the Max. It has a lot of the stuff you said, bilberry and green tea extract and turmeric and zinc, whatever you had told me, they're all in this one thing. So I did it. I went through a whole set thing. But it is just concerning at this point to just be so at this point, I have an appointment coming up in 2 weeks in October, and I'm hopefully going to go see if at least the pressure is less or whatever. But it's not your typical thyroid eye disease response as far as I could tell. So that's where it's been a little bit concerning. So that's what pushed me and said, okay, let's go speak to Dr. Eric and see what he has to say.
Thank you for giving that. You said you chatted with me through one of my sessions. Was it a Facebook Live or was it
It was one of the classes.
One of those 5-day events? Okay.
I asked you a question each of the times. I had done that SCACT. I'd asked you a question about SCACT to see if you had ever heard of that being helpful. And I did 6 months of that SCACT. Overall, I feel so much better in general. My health is better. I feel one of the side effects of is constipation. I always have constipation. And I always say that the irony of Graves' disease is that when you're losing weight, it means you're sick. And when you start gaining it back, so all the weight that I keep trying to lose, it all comes back. And it's yay. So now I've been able to lose weight in a healthy way. So overall, I do feel very good on this diet. It's very hard to find stuff sometimes, but I've worked it out. I also have I have a gallbladder issue. So I can't eat a lot of meats. So that also took a lot of the stuff that you could eat on the whole meat and anything fatty. I could eat eggs, but I can't eat avocados. I find that oily foods really aggravate my gallbladder. So I've had a few gallbladder attacks. So I have to be careful. And I think in some of the classes you've mentioned that there could be a connection, or I've heard that there's a connection between the hyperthyroidism and the gallbladder. So I don't know if that's connected. But at one point they wanted to take my gallbladder out. And I was like, no way, I'm not doing that. I've just been hyper careful about what I eat. And it's very hard. I like meat. It's hard to not eat it, but so I'm careful with my diet and everything. But I did hear about you. So I asked you in one of your last live.
Yeah, as far as the gallbladder, and obviously listen to your body, but then also the problem with the gallbladder is it's mainly a bile metabolism problem. It's not really the gallbladder itself. So just addressing the bile metabolism. And I do have some information on my website, naturalendocrinesolutions.com. If you just do a search for bile. And then I also have a few interviews on my podcast where I actually interviewed a few practitioners, spoke about the gallbladder and bile metabolism. But I mean, some people could benefit from bile salts. I mean, there are numerous supplements to help support the gallbladder, or should I say again, the bile metabolism more than gallbladder. And then problems with estrogen metabolism could affect bile metabolism. So as far as how do you know if you have problems with estrogen metabolism? I mean, sometimes if a history of ovarian cysts, uterine fibroids, thyroid nodules, a family history of breast cancer, could be some indications, endometriosis. But there's also a test, you might have heard me or others talk about, the Dutch test, which is a dried urine test that looks not only at the hormones, but the metabolism of the hormones, including estrogen. So something you might want to look into, just because if you had
Okay,
numerous
yeah,
gallbladder attacks, to
right.
try to figure out what the cause of that is.
Okay, that's good to know. It's secondary, but I think it's all connected.
Yeah.
And I personally feel that the cataracts are connected. It was interesting because I was looking up on the thyroid eye disease website. Like they said, what are your risks of having epithyroid eye disease? And one of them was cataract surgery. And I was like, really? I would never have connected, but I feel like my eyes got worse right after my first session. And I had like these experiences where like the reflection of the sun on something would bother me so much, and everyone else would be like, what are you talking about? It's totally fine. It's a fence. Like, why is that bothering your eyes? And I was like, I don't know. It just is killing me. So I do think that there was a connection. I do think that otherwise I can't figure out why I would have cataract surgery at such a young age. I do think that I have seen connections between thyroid eye disease and cataract surgery.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a few people with cataract surgery and also having thyroid eye disease. I can say it's a large sample size. It's a lot of people. So this is a little bit unique as far as what I usually work with. But you said you have an appointment just with the regular eye doctor in a
No,
couple
a
of weeks to measure the
neuro-ophthalmologist.
pressure, and then I know you said neuro-ophthalmologist. That's the one in 2 weeks that you're having?
Yes, 1 in 2 weeks.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
the regular doctor didn't really. So I'll tell you, it's
Okay.
interesting. My first doctor who told me I needed cataract surgery was a doctor that I went to for thyroid eye disease. He was a specialist in that. He knew about thyroid eye disease. That's why I
Hmm.
went to him. But I wasn't comfortable with him doing my surgery. I just was not comfortable with the office. So I
Yeah.
waited, and I found a separate doctor who was a cataract doctor. But I think what happened is that when I went in August, and she's like, "Oh my gosh," she panicked, and I panicked, but I forgot to tell her that I have the thyroid eye disease. That I think had she known, meaning she was looking at it from a cataract point of view, because she was just looking to see, if it was like, what is it, a dislodged retina or something like that. That was her main concern in the beginning. But I was like, when I came home, I was like, there's a whole thyroid, that the thyroid issue is there also. And really, they were very hard to reach. And I just was kind of waiting to see how I went health wise to try to see if I could. And anyway, I called up and I wanted to make these appointments. And these doctors, this was a neuro ophthalmologist, this was in August. And they were like, sorry. I said, you're not a current patient. We won't see you early. And I was just like, okay, January is a long time to wait when my doctor says I need to be seen yesterday. So really, that's been my struggle, is the fact is that I haven't been able to even make the appointment. I looked, even there's only like 5 neuro ophthalmologists in my area. So it's very hard to find. And my regular doctor was just like, you're going to the neuro-ophthalmologist. So she was just like, okay, they'll deal with it. So I haven't really been back to the regular eye doctor either. But I have this appointment with one of the doctors October 16th. So I'm hopefully going to go and we'll get that pressure checked and see if there's been any improvement.
They did say the retina is intact, right? So it's all
Yes.
just a
Yeah.
swelling on the swelling of
It's
the
a
optic
swelling of
nerve.
the optic nerve.
I mean, that's good about the retina. So they haven't done anything as far as steroids, prednisone. Not that I'm telling you to take that, but
No, and you should know that's why I'm also not running, because when I spoke to my endocrinologist, she called me up just to talk to me about it, just because I had called her and I was just saying I'm really struggling with this because I was very scared. It was very nerve wracking. And she said that there's this medication, I think it's called
Tepezza, yep, Tepezza, yep.
and I'm like, and it's like, yeah, you have to get a shot for 8 weeks. And I'm like, I'm looking at the side effects and I'm just like, this is not where I want to go. And it's even for the things it says it's for, it says for eye bulging. I'm not having that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not having a lot of the symptoms that are typical. It just, the thought of going that way is also what pushed me not to be like calling them every day and saying, do you have a kid? Do you have an appointment? Because I don't really want to go on that type of medication. I'm okay with going on medication when you need to. But for me, this feels like it's not going to solve the problem. It's just going to make 100 other problems, I find that like I'm straddling between regular medicine and trying to be more of the naturalist. I'm kind of between the two, I would call it,
I agree with the Tepezza as far as usually it's like for bulging, sometimes for double vision, but I can't say I've had a lot of people go through the Tepezza, but it seems to work well for the bulging, double vision, kind of hit or miss. But for swelling of the optic nerve, I don't know if that is the approach that I know for me, it probably wouldn't be the approach I take. I think it's wise to speak with the neuro-ophthalmologist and see what they have to say a couple of weeks with the appointments. But in the meantime, my guess, I could be completely wrong, and definitely feel free to shoot me an email after your appointment, but I'm thinking they're going to give steroids to reduce the inflammation. I'm not saying that's not, there's definitely a time and place for that. You've done the AIP diet, which is great. Obviously, it hasn't completely helped. I mean, it helped, but not completely because you're still having
Right.
the vision problems. There are other natural agents that you could take, some that you might be taking. I mean, you're doing the vision supplement, which is fine. But as far as helping with the inflammation associated with eye disease, the eye supplements probably are going to have like minimal impact. So I would say if within the next couple of weeks, there's definitely some things you could do, and we'll talk about these to help potentially lower the inflammation. And then, like I said, there is a time and place for the steroids. I don't love them. You probably don't love them. Most people don't like the steroids. Hey, this is Dr. Eric. And if you're looking to do everything you can to save your thyroid, in addition to listening to this podcast, there are a few different ways we can help you. First of all, I've written 3 books on thyroid health, 2 related to hyperthyroidism and 1 related to Hashimoto's, and you can get all of them on Amazon, or to learn more about them, visit savemythyroid.com/thyroid books. Second, you can also join my Graves' disease and Hashimoto's healing community by visiting savemythyroid.com/thyroid group. And finally, if you want to get personal help from me, you can visit the website workwithdreric.com. Just to let you know, I only see a limited number of new patients each month, and I do require anyone interested to complete a brief online application before working with me. And now back to the show.
Especially now, since they told me that I got cataracts from steroids.
I get it. I understand it.
You kidding me? Like, keep
Yeah.
me away from them. I haven't been on them yet. Like, and they caused me
Yeah.
all this problem. These quote unquote steroids. But you should know, every doctor I've spoken to has been like, I don't even know why you have cataracts. But I'm saying, but the steroids equal cataracts to me, And I'm like, that was already a trauma in and of itself.
Yeah, and I understand. You don't want to play too many games with the optic nerve, though. So if it like is getting
True. That's
worse,
what they tell me I have to do, or if it's getting worse, then I have to
yeah.
do it.
Like I said, I'm not telling you to jump to the steroids, because if I were you, I would try to do other things as well. I'm just saying like that's
Right.
when the optic nerves are affected, what there's a lot of inflammation. It's perfectly fine to do things naturally. And then if things don't help
Right.
naturally, that's when you might need, and again, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they won't recommend this. I'd be
Right.
surprised if they don't. I don't think they'll jump to this Tepezza, because like you said, it's getting the infusions every 3 weeks or for a total of 8. They're going to want to do something quickly, and then you'll have to get approved with your insurance. It's very expensive if insurance doesn't cover it. So I could be wrong, but I don't think they're going to recommend Tepezza. I think it's going to be something like prednisone. But yeah, so as far as what else can you do in the meantime, the basics, which you're already doing, the basics as far as eating well, AIP diet, try to do a good job of managing stress, try to get sleep.
I'm working on sleep. I don't get a lot of sleep, but I'm working on sleep. I've been trying to exercise. I've been trying, like, you name it. I've been doing smoothies, mostly green smoothies, lots of green vegetables. I have changed completely, eating, like, my favorite food is cake, to like enjoying vegetables and trying. I've really tried everything. I've been having selenium. I've been eating Brazil nuts every day
Brazil nut.
to get the selenium. I've really run the gamut. I mean, as far as what I could find on my own, like all different types of stuff. But I'm ready. I'm ready to write down whatever else it is that you think would be helpful, because I'm really looking just to whatever is going to work to try to gill.
Before I forget, exercise, just make sure you also don't overdo it with the exercise, because you don't want to overtrain. And
No,
yeah.
don't worry about that. For me, like, even walk is all I do is walk. And the truth is that even when I exercise, I always have to watch my thyroid, because I find that just even a little bit too much and my heart starts racing. And even when my thyroid is good, I always have to watch my exercise. If I push too much, I've had a few times when my heart started like beating very fast and I couldn't slow it down. I really was struggling to get it back to normal. So I'm always very careful that I don't do too much. I really listen to my body. So
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, it sounds like you're doing great with that. So Vitamin D, make sure you have healthy vitamin D. If you haven't tested vitamin D, I would say 25 OH or 25 hydroxy vitamin D. You want it to be at least 50. I think it's nanograms per milliliter of the units. I should know it since I've looked at it probably like few thousand,
Is that
5,000 times.
D3? Is that D3?
D3 is what you would take if you're deficient in it. D3 with K2, but yeah, like doing a 25 OH or 25 hydroxy vitamin D test, and then if someone's deficient,
I'm
that's
always
when,
deficient. I've never not been deficient. I'm always deficient. So
yeah.
you
So,
said
so
how
make
much?
sure you get those levels above 50, and the only way you know is by testing. So that's one very. Some would even say higher for autoimmunity, like 60 to 80. Some will say that. Some functional medicine practitioners. Omega-3 fatty acids. I don't know if you eat fish or taking omega-3 supplements.
So the problem I find with them is they're oily, and I'm always worried about my
With the
gallbladder taking
gallbladder,
these
yeah,
pills. The oil part of it is very,
I get it.
yeah, and I
Yeah,
can't eat salmon. I had salmon years ago, and I got salmonella poisoning. And every time I've tried it since then, my body's like, nope, I get sick from it. My body remembers, and that was even before my Graves' disease. So, like, I can't eat salmon. I've been having flax seeds, but that's omega-6, right? That's not omega-3.
I mean, it's some omega-3s like flax seeds and walnuts, for example, chia seeds, but they have to convert into the EPA and DHA, which they're not very efficient in doing. I mean, there's also algae oil. Some companies have algae oil supplements, which doesn't have as much EPA and DHA as a fish oil, but still better than nothing, at least until you support the bile metabolism. I mean,
Right. If I
hopefully that'll be,
that would be the better thing. If I
yeah.
filed this, then I could go back to the have
Yeah,
them.
and there's a company, Omega Quants, which is probably omegaquant.com, where you could do an omega-3 fatty acids, like an omega-3 index or a more comprehensive fatty acid panel. And then you could just see, you ideally want the omega-3 index to be at least 8%. And a lot of people, if they're not eating fish, not supplementing, they'll be like 4 or 5%. So that's also
Okay.
something to look into. The selenium that you mentioned is important. The only thing with Brazil nuts I'll say is that, I mean, first of all, they're not AIP, so you're following AIP, so you're straying a little bit with the Brazil nuts because
Oh, really? I looked
yeah,
it up. I thought it said that they were on there.
no nuts and seeds if you're following strict AIP.
Oh no,
Yeah.
I'm not doing the AIP strict. I'm doing one of the ones on your list. I have my list on your thing, so it's one, two,
Oh,
three,
okay.
1, 2, 3. Now I'm not doing strict AIP.
Okay,
I'm
okay,
doing
okay. From the hyperthyroid healing diet book
the
you're talking about?
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm doing.
Okay,
I'm
so you're
sorry.
probably doing like a level 2 or something like that, which okay.
I'm doing
So
one of the lesser, a little bit more. I've checked every single thing. For a while, like my mistake was eating sesame seeds, so I was like, no, I can't eat those. Like I have it now on my phone. I could check in the store. So it's not the real IAP, but I'm saying I was doing the
okay.
hyperthyroid
Yeah.
diet.
Now the thing also about I eat Brazil nuts. I eat organic Brazil nuts that I get from Costco, so I do like them, but you don't know how much selenium you're getting from the Brazil nut. So usually for thyroid eye disease, I'm going to recommend selenium supplementation just so we know how
Okay.
much
How
someone
much?
is
I have
getting.
one that's like 200. Is that
Yeah, typically I'll recommend 200 micrograms of
okay?
selenium. In some cases, I'll recommend 400 micrograms. I just won't put someone on it for too long because of selenium toxicity concerns. So the selenium's important. There's alpha lipoic acid that also helps to decrease oxidative stress, and acetylcysteine also could help with that. I don't want to make this about pitching my products, but I don't know if you saw my thyroid eye disease bundle and the purpose behind,
It's all the
yeah,
things that you recommend, basically.
pretty much it's tedbundle.com if you want to look at it, but it has something called SMT Burbula, which has berberine and alpha lipoic acid, and alpha lipoic acid helps to reduce oxidative stress associated with thyroid eye disease, but just in general. And then berberine has a lot of different properties, and that has been shown. There's actually research studies with both alpha lipoic acid and berberine and thyroid eye disease. Berberine could help with supporting the gut microbiome and in turn helping with thyroid eye disease. And then there's another supplement, which again, you don't have to get exactly the supplements there. There are other ones that are similar, but the one that's part of the bundle is SMT Immune, which also has different ingredients like curcumin and resveratrol and proteolytic enzymes. If you took that, you want to take it away from food on an empty stomach, but that really helps with the inflammation. And then the SMT Burbula also helps with inflammation, and oxidative stress and inflammation go hand in hand. I mean, it's not addressing the cause of the autoimmune component associated with thyroid eye disease. But obviously, the prednisone that they probably would recommend isn't doing that either. It's just helping to lower the inflammation. So the goal would be to either take what I recommend, well, not recommending, but again, what part of either the thyroid eye disease bundle or something similar. Again, it doesn't have to be that. You can look at the ingredients, get something else that's of good quality, and just see how you do over the next few weeks, see if the pressure reduces. And if things are heading in the right direction, maybe you wouldn't need to take the steroids if that's what they're recommending. Again, I can't tell you not to take them. That would be a decision you have to make, of course, but that's the approach I would take. Or if work with a patient, again, I wouldn't tell them not to take the medication, not to take the steroids if that's what they were to recommend. But if they wanted to take a more natural approach and see if that helps over the next few weeks. Of course, you've attended my 5-day event, you read my book. So, it's all about also finding, removing triggers, healing the gut, which goes deeper. But as far as the short term, just trying to get that inflammation down, those are some things that you could do in the meantime.
Right. I haven't quite found my trigger, but you should know on this diet, I've tried the coconut milk because all the other milks are off. And the coconut makes my stomach hurt every time. So it's interesting. You'd think that this diet is so limited, but even in there, I can't handle the coconut milk of it. I can handle a little bit of coconut, but every time I put coconut milk in something, I get a bad stomach ache. So I'm wondering if that's the sign of something that's a trigger. You know what I mean? I've eliminated 90% of what I usually eat, and this one thing still gives me a stomach ache every time I eat it,
Yeah. Well, it's probably not a trigger. I mean, again, it is a source of fat, so it could be related to the
Could be.
metabolism too. But many times people have to go beyond diet. Even in the Hyperthyroid Healing Diet book, obviously the focus is on diet, but there's a whole section that talks about going beyond the hyperthyroid healing diet. So diet and lifestyle is where you want to start off. So it's great that you've done that. But if someone is still having autoimmunity, if they have those auto antibodies, the thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins in the case of Graves, for example, then they want to do things other than the diet. I mean, not to say go back to eating, the cake that you love, but still to eat healthy and follow the level 2 diet's great. So you could continue following that. But in addition to that, you might have to do other things, reduce your toxic load, maybe do some functional medicine testing. You said stress was a big factor when this started again in 2020. So maybe do some adrenal testing. Again, I talk about this in great detail.
Adrenal testing. Because my numbers are good as far as the doctor's looking at. You know what I'm saying? She says I'm at goal. Everything is within normal range. So I don't even know if my numbers of, let's say, the regular thyroid stuff is going to even come up with it, because they're saying I'm fine. And even I started out, I was at goal. My son my 11-year-old son just got diagnosed with celiac. So when I got my last set of blood work done, I asked them to test if I was celiac. In order to test for celiac, you have to eat wheat. So once I found out that I do not have celiac, I was able to go on this diet, because I didn't want to go on the diet until I tested my blood to make sure I didn't really have celiac. So I'm saying once I found out I don't have it, now I went on the diet, and I've been I've been off of wheat and I've been off of all this stuff, but my numbers are fine. So it's these numbers, but there's other numbers. I'm sure if I did more testing, you would probably find other stuff.
I'm talking more about the antibodies and the thyroid, like the TSH, free T3, free T4. It sounds like those are looking good, but I'm wondering if those thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins are still elevated. If not, that's great. But I would think with the thyroid eye disease still being an issue, that those would still.
Well, that would be something that would, I'm saying, I see the T3 free. I'm just looking through some of my tests that I had here. It's the TSH. That's the TSH hormone. Because it's
no, that's different. It would be either TSI, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, or TRAB, which is the TSH receptor antibodies. With
that's something that they would have tested on the regular doctor too.
Not every single time. Regular doctor usually won't. So usually it's the endocrinologist, and they won't test it all the time. Usually,
no, I don't think she did. You know what? I think she didn't test them because she was testing for the celiac. She didn't want to do too many tests.
Okay,
so she tested the celiac, and she tested my cortisol for me because my friend mentioned cortisol, and I said the cortisol was also fine.
Maybe next time ask about the TSH receptor antibodies, or TSI. I like TSI better, thyroid stimulating immunoglobulins, a little bit more specific. But again, I would focus that vitamin D, get the vitamin D tested, make sure you have healthy vitamin D levels. And then some of the things we mentioned, like I said, you don't have to take specifically the products in the thyroid eye disease bundle. You just show that you have another brand of Selenium, which is fine. So just so long as it's good quality, those agents that I mentioned, those supplements that I mentioned, the alpha lipoic acid, the berberine, the natural agents that help to reduce inflammation, like the curcumin, the resveratrol. I mean, there are a bunch of them in there. I just mentioned a few of them, but I would look to take that approach. Hopefully that helps with the inflammation where maybe, and it might not completely resolve it, but if you see it heading in the right direction, then hopefully you'll be able to avoid the steroids. But again, that's a conversation for you and the doctor to have in a few weeks. And definitely keep me posted. Feel free to shoot an email once you have that consultation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Malka. Appreciate you doing this audit. Hope you learned some things. And again, look forward to
Thank you.
hearing from you in the near future. And thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in, especially those with thyroid eye disease. I hope you found this to be valuable, even if you don't have thyroid eye disease. I think there are some things that you could take away from this. But either way, thanks for tuning in. And as usual, I look forward to catching everyone in the next episode. All right. Take care, Malka.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Save My Thyroid podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you hit subscribe to stay up to date on the latest thyroid health-related topics. And to get your free thyroid and immune health restoration action points checklist, visit SaveMyThyroidChecklist.com. Thanks so much for tuning in.
So that was a wonderful conversation with Malka. So we talk a little bit about AIP diet and thyroid eye disease, which I also had a conversation with someone else in a previous Save My Thyroid Health audit, talking about how AIP diet helped to some extent. And same thing with Malka, helped, but it's not like it completely eliminated her thyroid eye disease symptoms. But diet's definitely a piece of the puzzle. And so I do recommend, at the very least, following a paleo diet. But if someone does have, especially moderate to severe thyroid eye disease, again, AIP diet itself is probably not going to be the solution, but it could be a piece of the puzzle. Cataracts. So cataracts, she feels like the cataracts are connected to her thyroid eye disease condition. And again, the research does show not really a relationship like where cataracts will necessarily cause thyroid eye disease or vice versa. Like one study suggested that there might be that type of relationship, but still unclear. I mean, I can't say that most of my patients I work with who have thyroid eye disease eventually develop cataracts. So I don't think that thyroid eye disease is a precursor to cataracts. And similar, most of my patients who have thyroid eye disease don't necessarily have a history of cataracts. I'm not saying that nobody who I've worked with thyroid eye disease had a history of cataracts, because that's definitely not the case. I have had some patients that I've worked with that had cataracts and thyroid eye disease, but not a high enough percentage where I could really see a clear relationship. Also, she mentioned my 5-day thyroid event. So briefly mention that. If you haven't checked out, I do usually like 3 or 4 a year. Many times they're free. Sometimes they're like a low cost. I bring this up because she was able to ask questions, and that's how she found out about me. So gallbladder and thyroid health, I didn't speak too much about this, really focused more on the eyes. I'm not going to get into great detail here because it's a post outro and I cover things really quickly, but gallbladder problems are really bile metabolism problems. And so that's why if someone gets the gallbladder removed, you still need to support the bile metabolism. And if someone still has the gallbladder, but has a lot of gallstones, again, there is a time and place for surgery, but doing things to support bile metabolism, like taking ox bile salts, things like artichoke could help. I have on my podcast, I have other episodes, including one, Dr. Eric Balkavage. I have an episode where I interviewed him. He's an expert when it comes to bile metabolism. I think I have a solo episode or maybe a Q&A episode. Yeah, anyway, so there is some information on the podcast. Tepezza, not too long ago, released a separate episode, talk about Tepezza, like pros and cons. And so there's definitely benefits, but there's also some big risks as well. Eye supplements. So again, most of the eye supplements out there, They're not really for inflammation. I mean, they could help to reduce oxidative stress, which in turn can prevent or at least slow down the process of macular degeneration. So I don't think it's a bad idea to take an eye health supplements. But when it comes to thyroid eye disease, they're probably not going to be too helpful. Selenium is something I usually recommend, almost always recommend for thyroid eye disease. Alpha lipoic acid I mentioned as well. Berberine I do as part of my thyroid eye disease bundle, my TED bundle. I have something called SMT Berbera, which is berberine and alpha lipoic acid. And then also selenium is included with that. Omega-3 index, I mentioned how ideally you want it to be 8%, and you could do a test like Omega Quant, for example, or another fatty acid profile. And I also mentioned how it's difficult to get that number up if you're just relying on things like flax seeds or walnuts. Really, fish is the best, or fish oil. If someone's a vegetarian or vegan vegetarian, they could do algae oil, but they'll have to take more algae oil because it doesn't have as much EPA or DHA. And that's similar if someone is taking cod liver oil. Cod liver oil, I like it, but it doesn't have a lot of EPA, DHA. So fish oils, and again, it depends on the fish oil. For my patients, I usually recommend at least 1,000 milligrams of EPA and at least 500 milligrams of DHA, and many times twice that amount. And you're definitely not going to get that with like cod liver oil or krill oil or algae oil. And then steroids for thyroid eye disease, not a big fan of this. And again, I'm not telling anyone, listen to this, not to take him or to take him. I will say there's a time and place. If someone has severe thyroid eye disease, I'm not saying it's really bad to do that on a temporary basis. I mean, if someone has optic nerve compression and the doctor's recommending prednisone, I think it's probably a good idea in that case to take the prednisone. But I'm definitely not a big fan of prednisone, steroids. There is a time and place for those. So I think that's all I'm going to discuss here. So I hope you found the conversation I had with Malka to be super valuable. And of course, I look forward to catching you in the next episode.